Africa's largest packaging company with operations in South Africa, other African countries and Europe. It produces packaging products from metals, paper, plastics and glass. Nampak market cap 22.8 billion rand, price to earnings ratio of 15.9 and a dividend yield of 3.5%. Does the story change when it comes to Nampak?
Who do you want to answer that?
Do I have to choose? Rowan.
So Nampak, it's also been a good story. I think their exposure is much more to the African consumer, and that's where they're seeing all their growth, is packaging to African consumer products. They've seen massive growth there. I think part of the problem, unfortunately, has been very disappointing South African performance. There, the growth has been very muted, I think up 4% in their last set of interim results. And the foreigners have been very excited. Obviously, Africa is still a great story, and the African consumer is something that you want to get exposure to, and Nampak is one way of doing that. But the South African operations, which still make up the bulk of the business, have dragged down the performance recently.
Paul?
Very interesting story, because if you wanted a deadbeat dinosaur on the local market, that was Nampak about 5 years ago. Totally discredited management team, lack of interest, declining consumer markets, import threats, trouble with the rand, old clapped out assets. This was Nampak, but a guy called Andrew Marshall came in and took this thing over about 5 years ago, and he did a great job, tidied it up, lowered the exposure to the UK, went into places like Angola, invested in new production plants at Bevcan, which is the drinks can manufacturer, committed to some upgrades on the glass side, which was also very good. And then so that all was reflected in the share price, but about sort of 2 or 3 months ago, he suddenly announced he's resigning, quitting. Anyway, not great, and then some rather average results most recently, but I think there is good news on the horizon. They've just appointed an
that's hopeful that there's good news on the horizon.
Executive, a guy called Dolph Lundgren. No, that's not really his name. His name, in fact, is Andre de Ruyter, but he looks like Dolph Lundgren. He is now going to be the new CEO, so I think they're ready to recommence that upward trajectory.
Is there an opportunity here then, Rowan?
Yeah, so it has pulled back. I think it got to almost 38 Rand, and it's dropped down to around 32, 33 Rand. So here you're getting, I guess, a more reasonable valuation. I think it's a medium-term story. If you do want exposure to that African growth story, and probably in a sort of more risk-averse type of way, it's a good place to get it.
Paul, anything else you want to add on Nampak?
Yeah, look, one of their biggest customers is SAB Miller. And that's because they are a major supplier both of glass bottles for the beer, of cans for ABI, because remember SAB Miller owns ABI, which is the biggest Coke bottler in the region, plus all sorts of other potential areas, because they're going to make the aluminium cans as well there, which is one of the new products that both the beer industry and the soft drink industry is looking at. Can you imagine a worse customer to have than SAB Miller? Not because they're not selling lots of that stuff, but because they are such an enormous and powerful global corporate. They are terrible to their suppliers. They beat the best deal out of them like you can't imagine.
Really squeeze those margins.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was part of the problem in the recent results, was that they had to take a big price cut in order to get a guarantee of that deal for the next 3 or 4 years. And so there was a bit of margin disappointment. But I just think all of this together, there's good grounds for a positive outlook on them.
Nampak, hot or not? Rowan?
I'm going to go hot, yes.
Paul, hot or not?
Yeah, I'm hot on it too, especially with Dolph running the company.
Sappy, man.